how did it spin so quickly? Because when October 7th happened, I think the general response of the world community was, this was horrific. I think the knee-jerk reaction of the world community was, oh my gosh, this was terrible. And the footage that was found on cell phones that were left behind, with a lot of those that had been killed, and some of the body cam footage, GoPro footage, whatever the invaders had and started streaming or posting up on the internet and bragging about, people saw and thought, oh my God, these people are total psychopaths. I mean, they have no empathy. I saw videos of invader calling home, I killed 10 Jews. Oh my, it was like they'd won the lottery. I mean, they were up so high, sky high, and the parents said, I can't wait for you to come home. Oh, I'm not coming home. I'm doing all of this. And so celebratory. And I think people were appalled. But in a matter of days, it seemed to start turning. Why? How did that happen? Why did it turn so quickly?
I wish I knew the answer to that question, because it's one I've been asked a lot. And in my work, I get asked very often, what is the root cause or the reason for anti-Semitism or hatred of Jews? To such an irrational level, as you say, when you look at things like that, to then hate the victims of it is bizarre. And I don't know the answer. I mean, there are many possibilities. I think that level of racism, of hatred against Jews is like a mental illness. But like many mental conditions, I think there's a degree of contagion as well, and fashion. So I think that when some people, especially younger people who are more impressionable, who are more passionate, who are more activated by political causes surrounding them, I think sometimes when they hear it, and they hear it with such fervor and enthusiasm from those around them, they can be easily led towards that. I think that also it's problematic that these groups like Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad or Hezbollah or any of a number of other groups who are behind these attacks on Israel, not least the Islamic Republic of Iran, the regime there that punishes its own Iranian people as well, most of whom do not wish to be under its rule. All of those groups are very, very good at spreading lies and spreading fake messages and deceptions about what's going on. So those who don't know what's happening are fed a constant flow of that sort of fake news, misinformation, lies, whatever you want to call it. And it becomes very easy to believe. Now, I've always said that the biggest problem in explaining these things is that the truth is very complicated and often quite ugly. So a lot of times, Israel's choices aren't between 1 and 2, good and bad, black and white. Often the choices that it has to make are between 2 quite horrible options, and they have to choose the least horrible. One good example is in the negotiations for the release of the hostages. Hamas and the other Palestinian terrorists that burst over the border deliberately took as many hostages as they could, because they know that this is their strongest weapon against Israel. So they took hundreds, children, infants, elderly people, Holocaust survivor, people in their 80s. And we know, that the Bibas children came back dead, for example. Now, those children didn't deserve that. But what the Hamas terrorists know is that Israel, given the choice of getting back even the corpses of the kidnapped, but especially those still alive, and releasing hundreds or thousands of Palestinian prisoners who were in jail for having carried out horrific mass killings, suicide bombings, or other acts of terrorism in the past, Israel all too often will choose to release those violent, ideological, jihadi killers, knowing that they will act again in that way in order to get back the hostages. Those are two dreadful options, bad and worse. And it's really hard to know which one should choose. There was no good option for them to choose. But of course, a country like Israel, which is led by a very moral commitment to its people to save lives, to save their lives, to rescue them if they're taken hostage, made the difficult decisions it has. And because it's always done that in the past, dating back even to the Jabril incident many years ago, was the sort of first big hostage exchange. But even looking at things like the Entebbe raid, when the terrorists took a whole plane of people hostage, they know that Israel will do whatever it can to get back hostages. And so they know that this is their ultimate weapon. I think that that's just one example of the complicated decisions that country has to make. And given that those things are so complicated, it's much easier for people who don't understand things well but want clarity to believe a beautiful lie rather than the ugly truth. And in many cases, I think that's what's happened. They've been spun a yarn about colonialism and imperialism. They've been given this very black and white kind of vision of oppressors and oppressed, victims and oppressors, David and Goliath. And these don't really fit to that situation. The situation is far more complicated and presents so many dilemmas that I think for many people, they don't even want to entertain the idea, just the same as they don't want to acknowledge what was in those videos you've seen and I've seen, just as they don't want to hear any of it because it so threatens their worldview that that kind of deep evil still exists, that I think it's easier for them to believe that that's not how it is, and they can just hate Israel for having to deal with these actions.
Let's cut to the chase. Your savings could be in serious trouble. When Elon Musk is out here warning us to brace for temporary hardship, you might want to listen. I trust Preserve Gold to safeguard my accounts, and I urge you to do the same. They're the only precious metals company I recommend. Are you going to sit back and hope for the best or take control of your financial future? Text Dr. Phil to 50505 to get your free precious metals guide from Preserve Gold. With gold prices recently breaking records and analysts predicting this trend to continue through 2025, you cannot afford to wait. As a bonus, you can get up to $15,000 with a qualified purchase from Preserve Gold. So don't wait. Text Dr. Phil to 50505. That's DRPHIL to 50505 today. You mentioned the hostages, and are we in the second phase now of this ceasefire? Is it phase 2 now? What do you think is going to happen? Do you think the ceasefire will hold? Do you think Hamas will violate? I think they've already violated it, but is there any chance for this to succeed? Will hostages be released? Are they now down to just bodies to turn over, or are there still people alive?
There are a number still alive, and there are a number who are dead. And I think that the Israeli authorities and intelligence services and negotiators have a good sense of what those numbers are. And I think that President Trump has been admirable in his emphasis on this point, that there is an obligation, a duty, a human duty, moral responsibility to do everything that can be done to bring back the hostages, especially those who are still alive, but also the bodies of those who aren't, so that their families can give them a respectful burial and have some form of closure to their horror. So I think there are hopes that there will be more released. And yet, as I said, it's very, very complicated. Some of the terms that the terrorists want in order to release hostages are just too much for Israel to consider them. But on the other hand, the idea of leaving hostages in that hell indefinitely or forever is also completely unthinkable. So an impossible dilemma for anyone. I think that in that respect, Trump's had a lot of criticism for some of his unpredictable or bullying behavior, not just in relation to Israel and the Palestinians, but in his dealings on the world stage generally. But I think there's a good reason that he's behaving that way. I'm not sure if it is necessarily the right answer, but I think to some extent, in this specific case, that kind of tough talk, those kinds of threats, and the sense that he might actually mean them, nobody really knows, is what might motivate these brutal terrorists to actually move somewhat from their entrenched positions. And so, yes, you say there was the second stage. Well, the original ceasefire blackmail deal to receive hostages was done in stages, and stage one was completed. Hamas did break many of the terms along the way. I mean, one particular way were those sick shows that they put on as they released hostages, and various other things. They at one point gave back a dead body that wasn't the Israeli woman who they had kidnapped, and that was also against the terms of the deal. So they've broken many of the rules, but again, I think they know they can, because there is a certain level of that kind of behavior that Israel, the West, America will tolerate if they're still getting hostages back. So I don't know exactly how it will unfold going forwards, but there is hope for many of those hostages who are still there. I just think, though, I just urge people to imagine what it must be like for those people being held. We don't need to imagine from nothing anymore, because some of the hostages who've been released in recent weeks have been giving interviews, and you can find them online, some of them with subtitles in English. And really the level of depravity and horror and barbarity that they were treated with is horrific to think about. The idea that one hostage I heard being interviewed this week on Israeli television said that he had his birthday and they beat him on his birthday, and he just prayed not even that he would be free on his next birthday, but that he wouldn't be beaten in this way. He was beaten so much he would fall unconscious and then wake up again still being beaten. That they would be given, one piece of pita bread in a day between several of them, half a liter of water between more than one person for the whole day. That they were kept underground in these tunnels that Hamas dug, specially using the money, using the aid that the world had given the Palestinian people. So all of these things are just beyond our comprehension, beyond our imagination. And yet I think it's so important that people do think on it and do comprehend it as best they can, because only by doing that can they understand the problems, the dilemmas that Israel is facing, and therefore the very extreme measures it's having to go to try to protect its people and to try to eliminate this problem from happening again and again in the future. Because that's really, I think, the other challenge that that country faces. This problem is not going to go away through placating or playing kind with the people that do those sorts of things. It's not something that you can do. There is only one language that I think that form of terrorism understands, and that is force and defeat. And Israel needs to win this in order to protect its future.